be a man and talk to me.
What is that? Is that a butterfly?
Yeah, it's a butterfly.
You're so classy.
I know.
I got dollar signs like a real hoe.
Anora is a drama film that came out in October of 2024. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to see it in October because it was a very limited release and it wasn't playing near my house. And that was very disappointing because the movie had a ton of praise from people online and it won awards at different festivals, and it was a movie I was really hoping to see before the end of the year. But then in November of 24, it went to a wide release and I got excited again. And even though I had tickets on 3 different days, I still did not have a chance to see Anora in November because something kept getting in the way. And I finally came to the point where I was like, all right, maybe I'm not going to be able to watch this movie before the end of the year. But then last week, I saw a showing of Anora at a very late showing, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. I'll just drink a Red Bull when I get there. So I went to the bar as soon as I got to the theater. I asked for a Red Bull, and the guy was like, well, it's basically Mixer, and I don't have a button to charge you with, so I guess you could just have a free Red Bull. So I got a free 12-ounce Red Bull, which was pretty cool, but I was very happy that I went and saw Anora because it's one of my favorites of the entire year. Let's get into it. So Anora is directed by Sean Baker, and it stars Mikey Madison as the title character of Anora. And Anora is an exotic dancer. She works at a strip club, takes guys in the back room, gives them private dances, and they give her lots of money. And one day she's introduced to Ivan, and Ivan is a Russian young man, probably early 20s, and very, very much so a man-child. Doesn't really care about anybody else, loves playing video games, but starts paying Anora for more than just dances, if you know what I mean. And one day, when they're done doing some fun stuff, he's like, hey, will you be my girlfriend for a week? I'll pay you to be my girlfriend for a week. I just want to hang out with my friends and I want to have a girlfriend. And so she's like, sure. She wants to make the money. He also is extremely rich because he is the son of very wealthy Russian oligarchs. And so he's got this mansion and she's like, I'm going to live the high life for a week. What could go wrong? So they're living the high life. They end up flying to Vegas with his friends, getting a huge room at some casino, having a fun time while they're there. And while they're there, he tells her that he loves her and he wants to marry her. And I don't know if anybody had ever treated Anora like that. On top of the fact that he's so wealthy, she just feels overwhelmed and says, okay, let's get married. And so they go and get married in Vegas. And while this starts to be the beginning of a Cinderella story for Anora, you find out that the Russian parents of this boy named Ivan are not happy at all. In fact, they're on the way from Russia to America to make sure that they get an annulment and Anora goes away forever. And so she has to fight, sometimes even physically fight, to try and keep her marriage together and also stay with Ivan because she thinks that she really did find true love. And that is the best synopsis that I can give you for Anora, but I feel like I'm underselling it because that's the dramatic romance part of the film. And right after that synopsis is really where it gets funny. And I mean extremely funny. So it's also a bit of a comedy. But if that sounds like an interesting concept to you, I don't know if this movie's playing in theaters anymore, but I highly recommend you check your local listings to see if it's a movie you can watch in theaters. If not, I hope it's streaming soon so you can check it out there. With all that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives for Anora. My first positive is the storytelling and tonal shift that the director is able to do throughout this film. So on paper, the story of Anora sounds kind of boring. At least it did to me when I first saw a trailer for it and when I first heard about this film. An exotic dancer marries a young Russian man named Ivan, and then the parents don't like it and they want to get an annulment. It just doesn't sound like much on paper. But the way the story is told, you're invested throughout the whole thing. Whether it's the first opening portion of the film where you've got this romance story where maybe there's love building between the two of them, and then an all-out hilarious, chaotic comedy in the middle of the film, and then an absolute heart-wrenching gut punch of a movie at the very end. So there's a lot of emotions and tonal shifts that happen in this film, and the director's able to weave them seamlessly so that it never feels jarring. There's never a moment where I was like, man, I was just upset, now I'm laughing, that doesn't feel right. Or I was just laughing, now I'm upset again, that doesn't feel right. Like the way the director's able to tell this story, the way that they're able to weave through those tonal shifts is done so damn well, and I loved every second of it. kept me on the edge of my seat, which might be the first time I've ever said that about a drama. My next positive for this movie has to be the comedy, but more specifically, the way they shift into the comedy, because you are dealing with a very romance, drama-driven story until you get to that comedy. And like I said, it's not jarring, but I love the way they get into it. Like, I couldn't believe I was laughing this much. So at a certain point of the movie, Anora and Ivan are sitting on his couch in his mansion. They're just enjoying their lives when there's a knock at the door. And as it turns out, the Russian parents that are on their way from Russia have sent a couple of their guys to the house to hold both of them there so that when they get there, they can take them to court and get it annulled. And when they get there, Ivan, being the man-child that he is, runs away. And so while two of the guys are trying to figure out what happened to Ivan, the other one is trying to hold Anora down, and she just keeps messing him up, whether it's bashing him in the head, biting him. But the great part about this scene is that as the other guys will cycle through, they'll be like, what's wrong? You can't take care of a girl? Like, what's the problem here? And they'll go to try to stop her, and she'll break one of their noses. And it's just funnier and funnier as it goes along. Once they get on the same page, I feel like the movie even gets better, because once Anora and these guys are all looking for Ivan for the bulk of this movie and they're actually working together, their back and forth that they have with each other is absolutely hilarious. And that leads me to my next positive, which has to be Mikey Madsen's performance. Mikey Madsen's performance in this movie is phenomenal. Now, I had seen her before in films. She was in Scream 5 as one of the Ghostface killers, and she was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Leonardo DiCaprio. And I thought both of those performances were good, but I've never seen her shine in a film. And in this movie, oh my God, does she shine. You buy into her wanting to get out of this lifestyle that she's in, sort of by any means necessary. She sees this guy, Ivan, who's telling her that he loves her, who's telling her, no, I want to marry you. I want to stick it to my parents that I married an American girl, so let's get married. She believes him. And then you feel so much from her throughout this movie. The way she's able to portray emotions, whether she's angry, happy, upset, whatever the case may be, whatever emotion she has, you feel that emotion with you. At a certain point, she stands up to those parents. When she does, you want to get up and clap in the movie theater. I didn't. I'm respectful, although it was an empty theater, but you want to get up and clap. You want to be on her side. She finds a way to give a very powerful performance all the way up to the end, which is the last thing I want to talk about in my positive section, because the end of this movie goes from being this lighthearted comedy to an absolute gut punch when you realize the character of Anora doesn't know what real love is. She doesn't know. I mean, she's basically used as an object at her job by men who are cheating on their wives, or men who just don't care about women or treat women like items. And so she doesn't know what true love is. And there's a moment at the end of this film that really makes you just have your heart broken by her performance, because she receives something and the only way she knows how to pay that person back is with sex. And you feel for her in that moment as this broken person who's never really had anyone love her before. And you see, like, halfway through that scene at the end of the movie, she realizes she has no idea what she's doing in life, and she has no idea what love is, and you just see her break down. And the movie ends on that note, and it's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. It's hard to describe right now because you feel so badly for that character, but that just goes to her absolutely perfect performance throughout this film. That'll lead me over to the negatives of this movie, and honestly, I don't personally have a negative, which is why it's one of my favorite films of the entire year. But I will say that I understand some people having negatives with this movie when it comes to the sex and the nudity. Because if you don't like sex or nudity in a film, or you don't like a lot of it, this movie has it in droves. And it has a lot of nudity throughout, it has a lot of sex throughout, because those are the storytelling elements of this movie. You have a sex worker, an exotic dancer who becomes a sex worker, essentially. And so you've got this girl who's put into this situation where she's basically being used as an object throughout the film. And so I think that's going to turn a lot of people off. So it's not really a negative for me, but I do think that's going to stop people from watching it. But that is literally the source material for the story. So it's not a negative for me. But I felt like if we're talking negatives, I have seen online where the most I've seen for a negative of this film is either, well, I didn't like her performance, which blew my mind. I don't know who didn't like her performance. Or it was the sex scenes and all the nudity. And I was like, okay, I could see the amount of sex scenes or nudity in this film sort of being a turnoff for some, But for me, again, it served the story, so not a negative. Overall, I had an absolutely phenomenal time with Anora. It's a movie that I plan on watching again in the future. As soon as it's streaming, I will be watching it again. It's a movie I would highly recommend to everyone, unless you don't like a lot of sex and nudity in your movies, which I understand. But if you can get past that portion of it, I think you would really enjoy this story of this girl, this absolutely heartbreaking story, but also it's such a fun and entertaining film. There's just so many elements to it that I can't recommend it enough. But guys, those are just my opinions because that's my review for Anora. Have you had a chance to see Anora yet? If you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if we agree or disagree on some things. Maybe you were able to find some negatives with this film and I just wasn't yet because it's still relatively new in my brain. Maybe I'll have some negatives for it when I give it a rating at the end of the month. But with that said though, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of my Anora review. Had a great time watching this movie, had an even better time with this review. Just going over the events of the movie in my head while doing this review got me all hyped up for it again. This is seriously a top 5 contender for 2024 in my opinion. But on that note, if you want to check out any of the other content I've made throughout this year, well, I've got my best and worst of 2024 right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.